were you on 9/11/2001?
I was teaching at Orville High School. We were in the old building. And I was in my classroom and I was walking up to the library, and we had at that time a writing lab, and it was my period to go work in the writing lab in the library. And when I walked in, the Denise that had the television on, and it had just happened, and I just remember standing there and looking at the television, and the entire library was completely silent. Nobody was moving, and everybody was just staring at the TV screen.
I was a junior in college at Mount Union, and I remember that morning we were in class, and when we left there was just a buzz, like something was going on, and I remember going back to our room and we turned on the TV in time to see the second plane hit the tower. So it was, I was in college, so it was kind of a weird few weeks there following that.
I was at Orville High School in my senior year. I remember walking from first period to second period, hearing about something that happened. Got to second period and the TV was on saying what happened. I remember watching the rest of the day until we were let out early. We just watched in disbelief of what happened. And that's what I remember the most.
So at 9/11/2001, I was actually in the computer lab in the old building. We had a computer program that day. We were going to run through a simple geology lesson, learn about earthquakes. And kids were doing their lab, everything was doing wonderful. I'll never forget, Denise Ream stuck her head in and said, "Hey, did you hear that someone ran into a building with an airplane in New York?" Immediately in my mind I thought, well, some kook with a Piper Cub was in the wrong place at the right time. How'd he get in there? We had a TV, an old one, actually had knobs on it. And so I thought, well, I'll plug it in and see what happened. The image that was on there was of the First World Trade Tower burning. And we say it often that we become desensitized in regards to images because of movies and things of that nature. But this smoke billowing out of this building, no one really understood that. And it sounds silly, but how could that happen?
The third period is about 9:15, 9:17 a.m. 9/11. I was outside here on the football practice field. We were playing a game of speedball, which is football, soccer, and rugby. And all of a sudden we heard a high-pitched noise. The whole class stopped playing speedball. We looked up in the sky. So if you want to point at the sky, we saw an airplane do a U-turn. We heard a high-pitched noise. It did a U-turn, and it came from the east, and it headed towards north, did a circle towards the west, and headed back towards the east. And we said, what in the heck is going on? We have never seen anything like that in our lifetime, but it was the highest pitched noise I've ever heard. After class was over, we ran inside, and all the teachers, they say, "Hey, are you watching this on TV?" We said, "Watching what? What's going on?" And at that time, the teachers informed us that the World Trade Center was under attack. So our class turned on the TV, television, and all of a sudden, we saw the second airplane hit the second tower. And so that's when I knew something bad, drastic was happening in America that day.
So on September 11, 2001, I would have been in 6th grade, and I just remember being at the old Maple Street Elementary School. I was in Mrs. Bukovitz's class, and I just remember another teacher came in and said, "Hey, one of the World Trade Centers has been hit by an airplane." And at first everybody thought it had to be an accident, right? An airplane must have accidentally not seen it, ran into it, something like that. And then later when we got news that a second one had hit, then everybody kind of knew, okay, this was obviously intentional. And as a 6th grade boy, we were just all kind of excited. I just remember talking with my friends about, does this mean we're going to go to war? Who did this? All this stuff. And we really didn't understand the magnitude of it until they brought the 5th and 6th graders, just the older kids at the elementary. They brought us down to the auditorium with all the teachers, and we had almost like an assembly type thing where we all just sat and watched the news on the big projector screen. And that's when it really kind of hit home that, you know, you see people jumping out of buildings, and you see people that are covered in smoke and ash and blood. You see the brave firefighters from the FDNY, you know, running back towards the buildings to help people. That's when it really hit. And especially when you see these adults, these teachers that you look up to, and you see them like crying, that was tough. And that was something that I'll probably never forget in my whole life.
What do you remember most about that day?
At the time, the library was the only place that had televisions. We didn't just have access to TV in our room. And I started to head on down to the library, and as I was walking by, I was hearing chatter in the hallways, and Ms. Ream actually had the TV on, and we started to sort of, I don't know, I saw on TV what was happening, but I just didn't really comprehend what was happening, and immediately went back to my classroom, and they were right. We didn't know what to do. We sat there, and honestly, as old as seniors seem to me, whenever I talk about that I teach high school, everybody says, oh, you teach the older kids. They're still kids. I know you guys don't necessarily want to hear that, but I saw how young high school seniors could be that day. After I saw it on TV, I think the thing that I remember the most is what was going to happen immediately. At the time, I didn't know if anything was secure. I think everybody felt insecure about what was happening and whether we were going to have another attack. Again, we were at school, so I didn't know if we were going to have to go into a lockdown mode. I had young children at the time. My oldest was 6, my youngest was 2, and I know I was thinking about where they were and the fact that I wasn't with them.
Like I said, I was in class and we left, and there was just something, you could just tell something weird was going on. And I remember calling my mom. I think everyone, we lived in a small house, and I think all of us, our first instinct was like call home and make sure everyone was okay at home. Even though this was happening so far away, we were all just wanting to kind of connect back home with our families and making sure they were okay. And I just remember just feeling unease. The other thing I remember is I had a friend who was overseas, and she was actually stuck there because since there were no flights, nothing going on. Her sister lived over there, and she was stuck over there for a while. And I remember that being kind of scary too for her and her family because they couldn't get home.
I remember my dad picking me up early, which never happened, and then going to my grandmother's house because there was rumors that planes were just flying out of the sky in random spots. And I remember watching it because we had one TV, and it was the only thing on TV, and watching the towers come down over and over and over because that was all that was it. That was all that was on. Non-stop, over and over and over. For a 4-year-old, it's rough.
It was surreal. The kids were scared. I was scared. All I wanted to do was go get my child from daycare. But I had kids that I needed to take care of here. I had a room that I could see the front of the building, and cars were pulling up, and announcements were being made. So and so's taking so and so out. So and so needs to leave. So and so needs to leave. And all I could think of was that every parent was thinking exactly what I was thinking. I just wanted to get to my kids, but not every parent could get to their kids. So those of us who were in charge of children, whose parents couldn't get to them, we did the best that we could.
So at the time, my daughters were, it was 2000. So my oldest daughter was 5, and my youngest daughter was 2. And so the youngest was in preschool over at Trinity, and my oldest was in kindergarten at Wayne Elementary in Worcester. So the first thing I did was I called both of their schools, and I said, this is really going to sound really weird, but these planes flew into the towers, and I just want to make sure my daughters are okay. And I talked to both of their teachers, and both of the teachers said they're right here with me, they're safe, everything's fine. And I said, I know this sounds really weird, and they were like, no, the phone has been ringing off the hook. Like, you're not the only person that's doing that. And then the other thing I remember distinctly is it was a fair night. So I always took them to the fair to ride the rides, and there was hardly anybody there, and they had on the speaker, and it was just news coverage, like solid, like normally they play music and stuff, and it was just, you know, just news coverage of what they thought.
What do you remember about America's reaction in the days following, specifically 9/12/2001?
The days following seemed one of the things I remember is quiet. Looking up in the sky, you know, we always see the trails of smoke or vapor from the airplanes, and just to look up in the sky for a while and see nothing. There was no activity up there. It was really weird. And I remember everyone wanting to help. My major was athletic training, and so, you know, I was CPR certified, and we were all ready to go. Let's go to New York and help. So I think there was just a very big sense of what can we do? How can we help each other? How can the country pull together? And I think that really happened there for a while, that everyone wanted to be a part of making things better, making things right. And yeah, that's what I remember most, is just that the country pulled together. It didn't matter what color or what race or what religion or what anything. It was just, we are Americans, and let's all make this better however we can do that.
The very next day, it was a very strong stance of America to say, we are not shutting down. We're not having a moment of silence. We're not shutting down. A lot of the countries who lost people from the World Trade Center sort of out of reverence shut down the next day and just had sort of a day of breathing. America felt very strongly that we just need to press on and show them that they couldn't dominate, they couldn't win. So we came back to school the next day, and what do you do? Nothing seemed important in school the next day. In the next couple weeks, everything just seemed like it took a back seat to what had just happened, and nobody could really get through a day without talking about it. Nobody could get through an evening without watching the news coverage and hearing heroic stories and hearing tragic stories, and it was just overwhelmingly emotional.
What I remember is the togetherness, the patriotism that the whole country had, and how everybody was united to beat what had attacked us and to come together and not let this overcome us. That was something I always remember, especially in like sports. The patriotism when sports came back was something that stuck with me.
When this whole thing transpired, I was just like every other American. We wanted to find out who did this to our fellow American countrymen. I wanted to join the military, and I was willing to do whatever it took in order to serve justice to those Americans who lost their life. I was a young teacher here, so I was only in my 20s. I was ready to enlist, like most of my friends. We were ready to fight for the rights of our country.
The thing I remember most about the days following September 11th, for me, it was all about seeing our country come together. You know, in my lifetime, I've never seen anything quite like that. Like, it's hard to imagine now because our nation's so divided, but after that happened, everybody was just American, right? It wasn't about like Republican, Democrat, this or that. Everybody was American, and a lot of the phrases you'd see everywhere was "United we stand." And, you know, seeing the patriotism of our country and seeing, you know, everywhere you look, people were wearing shirts with American flags. People were hanging them outside their houses, and, you know, at all the sporting events, you'd see them on people's, you know, helmets or baseball caps or whatever. The unity that it brought us to be able to, you know, show the world that this isn't going to stop us, and that, you know, we're going to be a united front, and we're going to do whatever we can to find justice for all those victims.
Stories that came out of that, and stories will continue. Today, we're still dealing with 9/11 because of the respiratory issues. All the survivors, all the incredible men and women, firefighting and rescue, EMS that lived through that, breathed in asbestos, arsenic, all sorts of heavy metals and carcinogens, and they are being affected by it now.